16 people sat in total silence, 9 days into a vow not to speak a single word, when I walked to the front of that room and knelt down in front of the man my wife had been calling her soulmate. No greeting, no shouting. I just opened a folder to page 4 and set it on the floor between us. Here's the part nobody in that room understood, including my wife sitting 3 feet away with her eyes closed. I hadn't come to make a scene. I'd come to show one man exactly what happens when you build your entire life on a foundation nobody bothered to inspect. I'm an engineer. My job is figuring out why things fall down after everyone insisted they were fine. And for 14 months I'd been investigating the quietest collapse of my career, my own marriage. Stay to the end because the truth I found wasn't the one I expected, and it wasn't only about him. Before I get into it, hit subscribe and tell me where in the world you're watching from tonight. My name's Marcus Delaney. I'm 47. I own a firm in Cleveland called Ironwood Structural. We do forensic engineering. When a parking garage fails, a balcony comes off a building, a roof lets go under snow load, somebody calls us. We stand in the wreckage, take core samples, read a decade of maintenance logs, and I write a document that answers exactly one question. Why did it fall? Not who's to blame. That's for the lawyers. My job is the sequence, and the sequence always starts earlier than anybody wants it to. I tell junior engineers this about 6 months in, when they're still shaken by their first bad one. A wall that's failing and a wall that's fine look exactly the same from the couch. Buildings don't lie to you. They just tell you late. I've said that sentence maybe 40 times in 20 years and in classrooms, depositions in front of insurance adjusters. I never once ran the analysis on my own house. It was the first Sunday in February, 4 degrees below zero. That flat blue Lake Erie light that makes everything look like a photograph of itself. Noelle and I walked the Edgewater Park Loop every Sunday, had for 11 years. 3 miles, coffee in the car after. The 1 hour a week nothing else was allowed to touch. We were at the far point of the trail, the exact spot where turning back and going forward cost the same distance. She stopped walking. Marcus, I stopped too. I remember thinking she'd twisted an ankle on the ice. I have to tell you something, and I'm going to say it badly. I didn't answer. I go quiet when I'm frightened, and it reads as calm. It has never once been calm. There's someone, she said. His name is Callan. Wind. A dog barking on the far shore. Here's what I want you to understand, she wasn't crying. No trembling lip, none of the theater you'd expect from a woman detonating 15 years of marriage on a frozen lakeshore. She looked tired, like someone finally setting down a weight she'd carried up a long hill. I met him at a retreat. In November. I did the arithmetic without meaning to, my brain just does that. 14 weeks, 14 Sundays. This exact trail. My glove in her glove, he does silence work, she said. Grief retreats. She searched for the word, and when she found it, she said it like a confession of faith. He's awake, Marcus. I turned that word over the way you'd turn over a piece of failed concrete hunting for the fracture line. Because she hadn't picked an adjective for him. She'd picked one that only means something in relation to somebody else. If he's awake, what have I been? His last name. I asked a pause. Vesper. Callan Vesper. I filed it the way I file a batch number off a rebar tag. Not with anger, with storage. Okay, I said. She stared at me. Okay? It's 4 below. Let's finish the loop. And we did. The last 1.25 miles side by side. Not one word between us, and I have never in my life been so aware of the sound of my own boots. If you've ever received news that ended your life and then had to keep walking 25 minutes because the car was parked at the other end, you know something about the human animal that most people never learn. The body keeps its appointments. It doesn't care. That night I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark and didn't turn on the light. 15 years, and she'd told me on the ice at the exact halfway point. I want to be honest about the first hour, and it wasn't grief. Grief came later in like weather. The first hour was uglier and simpler. Humiliation. I'm the guy people call when something falls down. I get paid a great deal of money to notice small anomalies. I once traced a 9-story failure to a substituted rebar spec from 11 years earlier, buried in a subcontractor's fax cover sheet. And a man named Callan Vesper had been walking around inside my marriage for 14 weeks, and I hadn't noticed a thing. I opened the joint account and scrolled backward. November, there it was. A $4,400 charge dated the 9th. Merchant name printed right there in plain text I'd glanced at and approved from a dentist's waiting room. A $1,900 charge at an outfitter on the lake in December. 2 nights at a place near Put-in Bay in January I'd assumed was a gallery trip. Dinner in early January at the restaurant we went to for anniversaries. 11 of them. She'd taken him there. I set the phone down, picked it up, set it down again, and I'm not proud of this. But this channel doesn't work if I'm not honest. I laughed one syllable alone in a dark bedroom. Because 2 summers ago, Noelle told me the garage was too cold to throw pots in winter. And I spent $11,000 pouring a slab, insulating the walls, running a dedicated 200-amp service so she could fire a kiln without browning out the house. I gave this woman 200 amps. He doesn't want anything from her, she'd said. Good, I thought, because nothing is about to cost him considerably more than he's expecting. I texted Renata Cole at 11:20 that Sunday night. Need you tomorrow. Not a work thing. Her reply came 9 minutes later. 7:30. Bring the last 5 years of statements. Don't do one single thing before you get here. That last part mattered more than anything else in this story. Renata Cole is 59, spent 11 years as a prosecutor before she got tired of the state's priorities and moved into family law. Her office is above a bakery on Lorraine Avenue. It smells like cardamom and she's never once mentioned it. She read for 20 minutes without saying a word. Then she took her glasses off. How do you feel? Like a building that passed inspection, almost a smile. Okay, walk me through what you actually own. Here's the part people don't understand about loving somebody for 15 years. You stop seeing the architecture. You just live in the house. Noelle never once looked at the walls. Why would she? I built them. Her studio on Detroit Avenue, the place she built from a card table and a second-hand wheel. The commercial lease was held by Ironwood Structural, not by her. Her name was on the window. Mine was on the paper. The gray van she drove to galleries in Erie and Chautauqua sat on my company's fleet account. The house was in both our names, fine, standard. And Warren Byrne, Noelle's father, 74, retired lineman, 31 years climbing poles for the power company. Emphysema now, lives alone in Ashtabula in a house with a ramp I built when his retiree coverage collapsed 4 years ago. I'd quietly rolled him onto Ironwood's small group plan as a contract consultant. He consulted on exactly nothing. He knew that I knew, and neither of us ever said it out loud, because that's what you do when you love somebody's family. Renata wrote it all down, then drew a line under it. There are 9 things you can do. 6 of these are business. Ending the lease, pulling the van, restructuring the LLC, filing the petition. Business. She tapped the pad twice. 3 of them are not business. 3 are just you wanting her to feel it. Freezing the joint card so her debit declines in front of a cashier. Theater. Sending a process server to her studio mid-shift in front of her people. Theater. She looked at me a long moment. I have never been so aware of being seen. I'll process all 9 if you tell me to. Everyone is legal, and in about 6 weeks you're going to want 3 of them back and you won't get them. I did 6. The way you take down a building attached to other buildings. You don't demolish, you unload slowly so nothing swings. The lease non-renewal went out on a Tuesday, 60 days exactly notarized, unremarkable, 1 page. The van went back Thursday. The LLC restructuring took 9 days, and the accountant never once asked why. And I performed. God, I performed. For 3 weeks I made coffee for a woman in love with a man named Callan Vesper. I asked about her firings, picked up the dry cleaning, sat across from her at the kitchen island while a stack of documents with my signature worked their way through offices across the county like water moving through a foundation. She texted me from the studio one afternoon. You've been so calm about this. It means more than you know. I typed back, we'll figure it out. I know some of you are cheering right now and I understand why. But I've thought about those 3 weeks more than the ice. More than the report, more than the room on the lake. Because if you've ever been kind to someone's face while a machine you built was already moving underneath their life, you didn't feel powerful. You felt like a stranger in your own kitchen wearing your own face. The 7th thing I did on a Friday was sign the paperwork removing Warren Byrne from Ironwood's health plan. Not cancel his coverage. There's a difference, and I made a great deal of that difference in my own head. He'd be offered a conversion plan. He'd just have to pay for it himself. Housekeeping, I told myself. A company can't carry a phantom consultant forever. I mailed it Friday afternoon. Warren called Tuesday. I let it ring 4 times, preparing a position, bullet points, language. Picked up on the 5th. Marcus. He had to stop because of his lungs. I got a letter, another breath. I'm not calling about the letter. Noelle told me what she did. Sat right at my table last week. I'm ashamed of my daughter. I want you to hear that from me. Whatever else happens, her father knows. I counted the ticks of the heating system. That's not why I called either, he said. I called because after Ingrid died, you were the only one who ever asked how I was doing. Not how I was managing. How I was doing. 14 months. You're the only one who asked. A silence on a phone line has a texture. I'm going to be all right, he said. My nephew's helping me sort coverage. I just wanted to say thank you for the ramp, and thank you for asking, and I'm sorry as hell. Then he hung up, because Warren Byrne has never in his life waited around to be thanked. I stood in my office a long while. Then I called Renata and told her to reverse it. She didn't say I told you so. She said, it'll take 4 business days, and hung up. I've paid that woman a great deal of money over the years, and I never got better value than in those 7 words. I never told Noelle. Not then, not in the divorce, not ever. Some things you don't do so the other person will know. You do them so you'll know. Now Callan Vesper, while I was quietly unloading the structure of my wife's life, he was 240 miles north of me in a cedar building on a bluff above Lake Erie, running something called the Still House. I didn't hire an investigator. People ask me why about 100 times. I don't need one, I am one. That's the entire job. Take a thing that failed, find every document that touched it, put it in order. So I put Callan Vesper in order. 11 days. Business registrations are public. Secretary of State filings, assumed name certificates, dissolution notices. I built a spreadsheet the way I build a construction timeline for a deposition. By the 4th night, I had 4 LLCs across 3 states over 6 years. Each dissolved within about 18 months, each registered to a residential address, each with a different woman listed as co-organizer or registered agent. I started with the most recent one before Noelle, Dana Whitlock, 43, Missoula, Montana. When I worked out who she was, I sat in the parking garage under my office with the engine off for 20 minutes before I dialed, because I'd figured out what she did for a living. Dana Whitlock is a hospice chaplain. She sits with the dying. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Dana, my name is Marcus Delaney. I'm calling from Cleveland. I think we need to talk about a man named Callan Vesper. 4 seconds of nothing. Then, who is she? Now what do you mean? Who is she? My wife, I said. She exhaled. The longest exhale I've ever heard from another human being. Was she grieving? She asked, and my parking garage went very quiet because I hadn't told her that. Her mother, 14 months ago. My voice did something I wasn't expecting. My brother, Dana said. 11 months before I met Callan. A pause. She's a chaplain. She knows how to let a thing sit. He doesn't find women, she said. He finds the dead and then he goes and stands next to whoever's still holding the body. Dana talked to me for 2 hours that night, and somewhere in the middle she said something I still can't put down. The retreats work. That's what nobody wants to hear. I've sat at 400 deathbeds. You need to understand what he actually does up there. People arrive so full of grief they can't hold a fork. And then they go up to that cold, beautiful place and for 9 days nobody talks. Around the 4th night they sleep. Her voice went hard. He gives them the first real rest they've had since the funeral. And when they're lit up with gratitude, that's when he sits down next to them. A pause. He was 19 when his own mother died. Nobody came. He told me he built a place where somebody comes. Here's where I have to be an adult with you. I've spent my career telling juries a building doesn't fail because of one bad thing. It fails because of a chain of small, reasonable decisions, each of which made sense to the person making it. Callan Vesper is the same structure. Not a monster in a bad movie. A man who found a real hole in the world. The fact that we abandoned the grieving and filled it and discovered that people who've just been rescued will give you anything you ask for. He wasn't lying about the silence. The silence works. He was lying about the rest. But I need to tell you about my November. Not his, mine. 14 months before that walk on the ice, Noelle's mother died. Ingrid Byrne, 9 weeks from diagnosis to funeral, a mercy and an atrocity in the same sentence. I did everything right. Flew her sister in, handled the funeral home, gave a eulogy that made people cry. Afterward, 3 relatives told me Noelle was lucky to have me. I remember accepting that. Monday morning, I went back to work. There was a parking structure in Akron. A woman named Adele Price had been killed in it when a section of deck came down after a freeze-thaw cycle. 2 years of my life went into that report. I found it. A rebar spec a subcontractor swapped in 2009 to save $4,000. Buried under 9 inches of concrete where nobody could see it. I gave a deposition on it 7 days after Ingrid's funeral. I was very good, and somewhere in that same stretch, I've had 18 months to build this model. My wife stopped throwing pots. Not dramatically. The studio stayed open, she taught her Thursday class, sold old inventory, but she stopped making anything new for 9 months. I walked past that garage, the one with the slab I poured, the 200 amps I ran, every day. And the wheel was dry. I never once asked her why. I noticed a substituted rebar spec in a fax cover sheet from 2009. I did not notice my wife had stopped making things with her hands. If you've ever been extremely competent at your job and catastrophically absent from your own kitchen, if you've solved a hard problem for a stranger the same week you failed to ask one question of the person sleeping 4 feet away, then you already know what I sat with in that parking garage after Dana Whitlock hung up. Callan Vesper did not take my wife. He found her outside in the cold where I had left her. That doesn't make what he did smaller. It makes what I did bigger. The 60-day lease notice landed while she was mid-firing. She called. First time in 3 weeks her voice had anything in it. There's a letter here from your firm. I know. It's a lease, Marcus. It's a commercial lease held by my company. I'm not renewing it. The kiln going in the background, that low animal sound at Cone 6. I built this. You did, I said, and meant it. And I paid for the building it stood in for 11 years and never once told you. Because I wanted you to feel like you'd done it alone. That was the worst thing I ever did to you. It just took me 15 years to see it. She hung up. The petition was filed on a Wednesday. Renata's paralegal handed it to Noelle in our own driveway on a Saturday morning, nobody watching. No process server at the studio. No audience, no anniversary. I thought about it. Thought about it the way you think about a drink. I didn't do it. That's not nobility. Renata told me I'd want it back, and I believed her. I'm a man who takes expert testimony seriously. The report was 91 pages. Business registrations, dissolution filings, a chain of residential addresses, 4 women's names, 4 states, 6 years, formatted the way I format everything. Cover page, table of contents, a numbered source for every line, and a notarized affidavit from a hospice chaplain in Missoula County, describing 19 months, $180,000 and a voicemail she still has. I drove it up. 240 miles along the lake. That flat gray grind Erie does in March. Ice shelves piled against the shore. A bound report on the passenger seat like a man delivering a subpoena to God. I want to be honest about why. It wasn't strategy. Renata told me not to go. Used the word inadvisable 4 separate times. I went because he was up there teaching people to sit in silence, and my wife was up there sitting in it. And I had spent 14 months being so quiet that a stranger walked into the space where I should have been standing. I was done being quiet. The still house sits on a bluff cedar standing seam roof, a single wood stove, floor-to-ceiling glass facing the water. Day 9 of the retreat, final morning sit, 7 to 9. I'd read it on the website. I parked at 7:40 and walked in through an unlocked door, because a place like that never locks anything. It's part of the brand. I've replayed this about 4,000 times, and it takes longer every time. The room is warm, smells of wood smoke and wet wool. That specific smell of a room where nobody said anything in 9 days. 16 people on cushions, 4 rows. A woman near the door crying without a sound. She wasn't crying about me or him, and she had every right to be there. At the front, cross-legged on a low platform, sits Callan Vesper. Smaller than I expected. 45. Gray at the temples. Cable knit sweater, looks like a man who's slept 8 hours a night for a decade. He looks kind. I hate that. In the second row, third from the left, my wife. Eyes closed, hair down, wearing a sweater I bought her years ago on a lake trip. My boots are full of snow and squeak on the pine floor. 16 heads do not turn. That's what 9 days of silence does to people. Callan opens his eyes, looks at me for 4 seconds, I counted, and I watch a man do arithmetic, check the exits without moving his head, decide in real time that the correct play is stillness, because stillness is the only currency he's ever traded in. He doesn't speak, of course. He's not going to be the one who breaks the vow. So I don't either. I walk up the center aisle in a room where nobody's allowed to make a sound, kneel on the pine floor in front of him, and set the report between us. Open it to page 4. 4 rows, 4 names, 4 LLCs, 4 dissolution dates, 4 states. He looks at it and it lands in his face. Not a movie flinch. Something just goes out of him. The way a room changes when the furnace shuts off. Behind me, someone shifts on a cushion and I hear my wife's breath change. 15 years, you learn the sound. I don't turn around. Nobody speaks for what I'd swear was a full minute. 16 people, a wood stove, a wall of ice-covered lake. Everyone slowly understanding something enormous is happening in complete silence. Then Callan breaks his own vow. Very quietly. Do you know what I actually do here? There's a woman in this room who hasn't slept more than 3 hours straight since her son died in June. Thursday night she slept 7. His voice isn't defensive. That's the horror of it. The silence works. I've never once lied to anyone about the silence. I know, I said. That surprised him. I read your intake forms. You asked them who died. When? What they haven't been able to do since. I put my hand flat on the report. You're not running a retreat, Callan. You're running a screen. He didn't deny it. Nobody came when my mother died. And there it is in the middle of a cedar room with a stove going. He wasn't lying about that either, and that's so much worse. If he were a hollow man with a good smile, this would be a simpler story and you'd feel cleaner at the end of it. He's not hollow. He was a 19-year-old boy in an empty house who decided nobody should ever be alone in one again, and built the answer, and then found out what a rescued person will give you. Every collapse I've ever investigated started as somebody's reasonable decision. Then Noelle stood up. I heard the blanket come off her lap, her feet on the pine. She walked past me, didn't look at me, not once. And that's the part that took a year to stop hurting. And stood in front of the platform, and said the only thing in this entire story that actually mattered. Say her name. The stove ticks. Callan looks up at her. Say my mother's name, Noelle says. And 16 people and me and the lake all watch a man's mouth open and produce nothing at all. He knew she died in November. Knew it was pancreatic 9 weeks. Knew Noelle hadn't touched a wheel in 9 months. Knew what she dreamed about because he asked. He knew every inch of the shape of the hole. He had never once asked about the woman. Ingrid, Noelle said, her voice breaking on the second syllable and kept going anyway. Ingrid Kirsten Byrne. She made rhubarb pie every June and was mean about it. Wouldn't give the recipe to her own sister. She could name every bird in the yard. She cut my hair until I was 19 and was terrible at it. She held my hand in the hospital and told me the fentanyl made the ceiling look like water. She was crying openly now, in a room where nobody had spoken in 9 days. Nobody moved. Then to Callan. You never asked me one thing about her. Not one. You only ever asked me about the hole. She turned and looked at me. I want to tell you this is where I felt like I'd won. I'd driven 240 miles with a 91-page report to be the man standing in the room when it came apart. And here it was, coming apart exactly on schedule, precisely as engineered. I felt nothing like victory. I stood there on that pine floor and did the math on myself. 14 months. I hadn't said Ingrid's name either, not once. Not at Christmas, not on her birthday in April, which I remembered and let pass because it seemed like it might upset Noelle. And the truth is, it might have upset me. He didn't ask about Ingrid because he didn't care. I didn't say Ingrid because I was a coward. The dead woman never got named either way. My wife lived in a house with 2 men who wouldn't say her mother's name, and only one of us was a predator, and I've had 18 months to decide whether that distinction is as large as I need it to be. I still don't know. That's not a lesson. That's just the truth, and this channel isn't worth much to either of us if I dress it up. Dana Whitlock filed a civil complaint that April. 2 more women came forward within 5 weeks, then a 4th. The Ohio Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division opened an inquiry into the Stillhouse's business practices that June, because when 4 LLCs dissolve in 6 years and everyone has a different woman's name on the paperwork, the state gets curious about where the money went. My hands never touched any of it. I gave Dana a bound report and a phone number. Never spoke to a reporter, never posted a word. And I want to be specific about why it wasn't restraint. I didn't want anyone able to say the story only existed because a rich husband got angry. The moment it becomes about me, it stops being about 4 women. Callan Vesper relocated. Men like him always relocate. Last I heard, he was in Chattanooga running something with a different name and the same website architecture. People like him rebrand. They also eventually get found because the paperwork is public. And paperwork doesn't forget. And there's always somebody who reads it. The divorce finalized on a Thursday in February. 1 year and 3 days after that walk on the ice. Ohio's an equitable distribution state. Long mornings in a conference room downtown. Noelle across the table doing arithmetic she'd been putting off. The house sold. We split it. And on the last day, I did the thing that made Renata put down her pen and look at me over her glasses for a good 5 seconds. I signed the studio LLC over to Noelle. The name, the equipment, the kiln, the 200 amps, the wheel. Her attorney thought it was a tactic. Noelle knew it wasn't, because I wasn't giving her a gift. I was returning something I'd been storing without her permission for 11 years. I'd taken a woman who built a business from a card table and a second-hand wheel, quietly put my name on the paper underneath it, and called that love. It was love. It was also the load-bearing wall I removed from her without either of us noticing. You want the sequence? Here it is. It wasn't Callan. Callan was the freeze-thaw cycle. He was the weather. Weather doesn't bring a structure down. It was the substitution 11 years earlier, when I put my company's name on her lease because it was easier and cheaper, and I told her it was for the taxes, and she said okay, and neither of us thought about it again. And then it was every day I walked past a dry wheel in a garage I built for her, and asked her nothing. Every collapse has a sequence, and the sequence always starts earlier than anybody wants it to. My father was a bricklayer. When he died, I took exactly one thing from his truck, a brass plumb bob about the size of a pear, worn smooth on one side from 30 years of his thumb. It's on my desk right now. Here's what I've learned, and it took a frozen lake and a cedar room to learn it. A plumb bob doesn't tell you what's straight. That's not what it does. It just hangs there and shows you which way the earth is pulling. Everything else, you have to actually go look. So here's the one thing I want you to do today, and it costs nothing, and it'll take 4 minutes. Tonight, ask the person you live with a question you're already certain you know the answer to. Not how was your day, how are you actually doing? Then, this is the whole exercise. Shut your mouth for 4 minutes and let them answer. Time it, phone face down. 4 minutes is much longer than you think, and you'll want to fill it around 90 seconds in. If you do, you'll learn nothing and you'll have proven you were never really asking. And here's the question I'd like you to sit with. Not is somebody lying to me, everybody asks that one. It's this. What has the person next to me stopped doing? And when exactly did they stop? Because they didn't announce it. Nobody announces it. The wheel just goes dry and stays dry, and you walk past it every day on your way to being extremely good at your job. Before I let you go, I want to hear from you. This one splits people right down the middle every time I tell it. 3 choices I made. Comment 1 if you think I was right to reverse Warren's insurance. If the revenge you don't take is the only one you get to keep. Comment 2 if you think I went soft and I should have taken everything that was legally mine, Warren included, and let her father ask his own daughter why. Comment 3 if you think the whole drive up the lake was a mistake, that I should have mailed that report and never set foot in that room. Because I didn't go up there for those 4 women, I went up there for me. There's no wrong answer. I've argued myself into all 3 at 2 in the morning, and while you're down there, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. It's a strange thing, knowing this story is playing in a kitchen in Manila at 4 a.m., on a train in Manchester at lunch, in a truck outside a job site in Alberta, and if you've ever walked past somebody you loved while they were quietly coming apart, if you were busy and competent and absent, tell us. Don't dress it up. Somebody scrolling past your comment tonight needs to hear it from a person who isn't me. If this one got to you the way it still gets to me, subscribe and stay a while. It's just me, these stories, and a comment section that keeps me honest.